What's up, guys? Today I'm going to take you through the approved USAPA rule changes for 2025 that will take effect on January 1st. While these aren't super big changes, I highly recommend knowing them all so that you can follow them and enforce them on the courts. So the first rule change is an interesting one, and it has to do with volleys, specifically the language around what a volley is. So the previous definition of a volley is that a volley includes the swing, the contact, and the momentum after you hit the shot. So everything that you just saw me do is part of the volley. But now the rule is stating that the volley does not start until you make contact with the ball. So until I actually hit the ball with my paddle, I'm not hitting the volley. And this has effect on the volley rules when it comes to the no volley zone line, so the kitchen line. And as you probably know, you can't hit a volley and then fall into the kitchen after you hit it. You also can't hit a volley while you're in the kitchen and go out of it. So what does this actually change though in a game? So the first thing that it changes is if I'm to touch the kitchen, then hit the volley, that is technically now going to be legal. And the reason for that is I'm not hitting the volley until I actually make contact with the ball. So before, this would be considered part of my swing, but now it's not. And because I have both feet situated behind the line when I hit the volley, it will actually count as good. So the next thing that it'll change is if I'm to start my swing when I'm in the kitchen and then I move behind the kitchen line and I hit the ball with both my feet planted behind the line, that will count. So before, if I was to be starting my swing while I'm in the kitchen, then I move back behind the kitchen line to hit the volley, that would not count. But now, as long as I get both of my feet situated behind the line before I hit the ball, it counts. So this would actually be legal because I have both of my feet behind the kitchen line. I actually think this makes sense because it was a little bit confusing before as to how you could rule that, but now you just have to make sure before you hit the ball, both of your feet are behind the line. You don't need to worry about your swing, which was very confusing. To clarify a few extra things though, if I hit the volley, then I touch the kitchen, that would not count, that would be a fault. So you have to make sure if you touch the kitchen, it's before you hit the ball. It can't be after you hit the ball because that is considered part of your follow through, and your follow through is momentum, which it's still illegal to carry that into the kitchen. The other thing I want to clarify is you can't be jumping out of the kitchen and hit the ball. You have to make sure both of your feet are secured on the ground before you make contact with it. So you can't be giving me this one. You got to be secure behind the kitchen, then it will count. Do these make a huge difference? Should you use them to your advantage? Definitely not. But just know if any of this happens to you during a game, you'll understand the rule well enough to explain it to who you're playing with and to your partner. And guys, there's actually another rule that involves the kitchen that I'm gonna go over later. The next rule that I wanna talk about though has to do with line calls, specifically line call influence from spectators. So imagine this scenario. A ball hits the ground very close to the line and you don't know whether or not it's in or out. But the person on the court next to you tells you that it's out, and you use that information to call the ball out. This is now deemed illegal. To call the ball out, you need to call it yourself, and you should only do so if you're 100% sure that the ball is out. So the rule changes, you're not allowed to get any influence from outside spectators or other players that aren't involved in your game. Whether that be them calling the ball for you or them influencing your call by giving their opinion, you should not take their opinion as input. You should only use your own eyes to call the ball out, or your partner's eyes. The next rule has to do with the serve, specifically the toss for the serve. So the new rule states you're now allowed to toss the ball with your paddle. So you don't have to toss the ball with your hand. You can toss it with your paddle and hit it like I just did there. The catch to this is that you cannot put spin on the ball. So just like you can't put spin on the ball with your hand, you also cannot add spin with your paddle before hitting serve. This applies to the drop serve too. So if I'm gonna do the drop serve with my paddle, all the same rules of the drop serve apply, and I cannot apply spin. I'm not really sure why this rule was made. I think it might be to help players that have one arm, but if you're watching this, you should probably keep tossing with your hand. I don't think many people will need to know that technique. The next rule also has to do with the serve and the return. Specifically, you're now allowed to use a verbal indicator to tell the server that you're not ready after they call the score, to which they need to wait. So before, they were actually supposed to ignore the verbal indicator, which I don't know why that was a rule, but it was. So now, if Drew's gonna serve and he just called the score, I can say, wait, and he has to wait for me to get into position so that I'm ready. So if he was to serve there, because I said wait, he would have to redo it and the point would start over. So good pickleball etiquette is that you should never serve when your opponent is not ready. But this rule sort of gives an actual legal way to prevent your opponent from doing that. So this is called quick serving. Another way you can prevent your opponent from serving too early is by raising your hand while you're getting into position. This is sort of what we do in tennis to make sure that you're not quick serving your opponent. And you never want to be doing that. It's not fair. It's not a good way to play. So just know now you're actually allowed to legally say, wait, and your opponent has to wait for you or else you'll be able to redo the point. So the next rule is an interesting one. It has to do with paddles. And it's essentially that there should never be a paddle that dominates the sport. So they don't want players to have paddles that are so good to where the nature of pickleball strategy changes. So the main feature that would make that happen is power. So if a paddle is too powerful, then it wouldn't become as useful to go for soft game shots like drops and dinks. The nature of pickleball would change and it would probably honestly get a lot less fun for many people. So because of this, a lot of players and the commission has rallied to sort of create a unanimous agreement that there should never be a paddle that's too good, too powerful. And they have a bunch of different regulations and rules around paddles that get approved. So as the player, what you need to know is that you should never use a paddle that's not USAPA approved, because if it isn't, it might have features that make it a little bit too good, that kind of make things unfair on the court. And you don't want to be winning solely because of your paddle, right? Your paddle should be good and you should always invest in the best paddle for your game that's legal, but you don't want to be winning because your paddle is just way better than everybody else's and it makes things unfair. So the main takeaway from this rule is that you should always try to use a paddle that's USAPA approved. You can see it on a paddle. There's always a little seal at the bottom if it is. And if you do this, things should be fine. And if you're looking for a paddle upgrade that's not illegal, I highly recommend checking out ours, the Sweet Spot Pro. This paddle has all the best features that are within the USAPA rules, but it'll still help you improve drastically if you're currently using something that's lower quality. And right now we're running our Black Friday sale. So if you use code Friday at checkout, you can literally get this paddle for $80, which is unheard of for something at this quality level. This is a Gen 2 thermoform paddle with a T700 carbon fiber face. You can hear the grit. You can't really find these for under $150, if not under $200. So $80 for this is insane. It's also just a great gift for the holidays. So if you want to support our channel, make sure to go check out all of our products. Everything's on sale. If not though, let's get back to the rules. So this next rule has to do with the kitchen line again, specifically with foot faults. And the rule states that if you disagree with your opponent on whether or not they foot faulted. So let's say you see that your opponent foot faulted on the kitchen line, or you see that they foot faulted on their serve, and they don't think they did, but you think they did. In order to get them to replay the point, you and your partner have to agree that they foot faulted. So the whole team has to agree that the opposing team foot faulted in order to get the replay. This rule also adds that if any partners disagree on either side about what happened in this sort of instance, the rule will go to the opposing team's benefit. So if I think that my opponent's foot faulted, but my partner doesn't, and they don't think they did either, they get the point, no questions asked. And the same thing goes the other way. If we both think that they foot faulted, and the person that did the foot fault doesn't think they did, but their partner thinks they did, then we would get the point. So you can't disagree with your partner on this, or the rule will go to the other team. So this next rule also has to do with faults, but it's not just foot faults. It's actually an amendment to a previous rule that if you ever commit a fault, you're expected to call it on yourself. So let's just use the foot fault as the example. If I volley with my foot in the kitchen, I'm expected to call that on myself if I realize that I did it. Now though, they're adding the phrase or your partner. So if I or my partner ever commit a fault, I'm expected to call it. So if I see my partner commit a foot fault and they don't call it on themselves, I legally need to tell the other team that I saw them do it, or else I'm breaking the rules, right? And this makes sense because if someone's breaking the rules on your team, you should let the other team know. You want to be fair, you don't want to break the rules. This applies to foot faults at the kitchen, foot faults at the serve, double bounces, any sort of fault that gives the other team the point. So if you see your partner or yourself commit a fault, now you need to let the other team know. It's not just the player that's committing it. And guys, if you like learning those rules, I'd very much appreciate it if you subscribe to our channel and you hit the like button below the video. It took a lot of hours studying the rulebook to make this, so that'd be very much appreciated. And if you think I missed anything important, make sure to let me know in the comments. But if you want to watch an instructional video where I teach my little sister how to serve, watch this.